Hello, my name is Rohak and I'm the founder of EmpowerCode, an initiative using the intersection of technology and social activism in order to empower youth. In today's episode, you will be learning about the difference between block level and inline elements, CSS inheritance, and header styling. So join me and let's get to work. The first question we want to tackle is one which involves the difference between block level and inline elements. By definition, block level elements are elements that are designed to hold relatively large or standalone blocks of content, such as large pieces of text. A block level element always starts on a new line. For example, div tags, headers, and p tags are all examples of block level elements due to their ability to hold standalone pieces of content. Inline elements, on the other hand, are designed to hold smaller pieces of content, such as a few words or a sentence within a larger block of content. Adding an inline element doesn't cause a new line to be created. Here's the big idea. Block level elements can contain inline elements, but inline elements can't contain block level elements. So now that we know the main difference, how can we apply our knowledge to our website? Well, let's get started and learn how. Hey guys, I'm currently in brackets and I am on the car gallery page of our website. So as you guys can see, for our header section, the nav bar is treated separately from the actual header. This is a perfect example of where we could nest an inline element inside of a block element. The header tag is a block and the nav tag is inline, so let's go ahead and add our nav tag inside the header like so. Awesome, now let's do the same for our home page. Awesome, now both our navigation bars are nested inside the block level tag of header. Now, what is another place which needs some help? Well, if we scroll down to the bottom of our home page, here we see that the A tag, or our link to the car gallery page, is on a separate line. We want to align its level with that of our P tag. So, let's nest it inside. Great, now as you guys can clearly see, our anchor tag is nested inside of our paragraph. Now, looking at our website, this is a lot more easier to read and professional than before. Awesome, now we have cleaned up our code by nesting inline elements within block level elements. But looking at our site, there are still some glaring areas of improvement. One area which needs fixing is the overall look of our website. Here in our style sheet, let's do this by specifying a selector which looks at the entire page. We do this by using an asterisk and then typing out curly braces like any other selector. Now we are looking at the entire page. If we set our background color to a nice floral white, our page instantly looks a whole lot better. Now let's go ahead and style our lists. Let's start off with our ordered list. Let's assign our OL tag a class of list style. Now that we have our class in place, let's open a new class selector with this name. So remember, for a class selector, all we have to do is write a dot and then the name of the class we want to style. For our first two properties, as you guys can see, we've set the font family to Helvetica, and finally, we've changed the font variant to small caps. Finally, for our last two properties, we assign the list style type to square, meaning that the bullet points will now be squares, and finally, we set a nice border style to the left of our list. Now, this list looks absolutely stunning. But notice, even though the class selector was only meant for the ordered list, it affected all the li tags in our list. This is a classic example of CSS inheritance, where all the child tags inherit their parents' property declarations. In this case, the child tags are all the li tags and the parent is the ol tag. Follow along in this video to see more examples of CSS inheritance. Okay, now let's move on to our unordered list. Let's assign our UL tag a class of unordered style, create a class selector for it, and assign it some values. After creating a class and finally assigning it a class selector, we are now all ready to get started with styling. So for our first three properties, we set a border for our list 5 pixels to the left of it and assigned it a shade of red. Then moving down to our last two, we assigned it a style of circle, meaning all the bullets will come in transparent circles. And finally, we tweaked the font size a little to get it looking great. For our last two properties, we assigned a new font family to our list and we stretched out our font to ultra condensed in order to make it more readable to the user. Looking at our two lists, and as you can see, they are much better than what they were before. They're styled well, they have nice borders, and finally, they just meld with the rest of the page. Great, but we can't forget about our description list. Let's head over to our car gallery page and take a look. Now we are looking at our description list, and since we want to style all the DT tags in our list, let's assign all of those a class of dir tag. Now that we have assigned a class to these two description tags, we can now style them individually and really make them pop out. Now let's open up a selector and get to styling. But now, while I could just label my selector as .dir tag, let me explain some important CSS inheritance concepts that you should be aware of. Let me write DL plus a space and then dt.dir tag, indicating that the class performs on a description tag inside of a description list. This is inheritance in action. We have our DL tag, which is our list in general, and finally we have our DT tag, which is what we want to style, and the dir tag is the class. Now, while we don't have to write this out usually, it's important to see how it all works in conjunction. So here in our styling, we have now bolded our font, added a underline to all of our tags, and set our font family to a nice, more readable version in the form of Trebuchet MS. Great, now let's move on to our definition tags underneath our DT tags. But instead of assigning another class to them and repeating the entire process, we can simply style the DL tag in general. This is where selector selectivity comes in, an integral concept in CSS. Because our DT tag is part of a class, modifying the DL tag as a whole will not affect it. This is because class selectors take precedence over general selectors. So now we can style the DL tag, and through the process of inheritance, we can also style the DD tags in the process. Isn't that cool? By using selector specificity and inheritance, we can efficiently style our description list. So here we simply add a general selector for the DL tag and let inheritance and selector specificity do the rest of the work. Here we simply set our font family to match that of the DT tag. Finally, if we take a look at our description list, this looks a whole lot better and well formatted than it was before. Now we are finally done with all of our lists. However, one of the poorest elements to our website is the header, which is poorly formatted, small, and highly unprofessional. So how can we get rid of this? Well, let's find out. Okay, let's start off by targeting the header tag in general. Remember, this contains our H1 tag and navigation bar. So here in our general selector for our header tag, we set a background color to a nice shade of blue, aligned all our text to the center, and added a padding of 20 to add some useful white space on all sides of our header. Now here comes the important part, the bottom three selectors. We assign a fixed position to the tag, which will make our header stay at the top of our page regardless of whether we scroll up or down. Finally, we set our width to 100% so that our header covers the entire page, and we set the Z index to 1, which makes our header visible from underneath the images and colors we have on the rest of our page. Now here, it's clear that our header needs some work. So let's go ahead and move on to the H1 tag in our header. We want to make this pop out but also seem professional and visually appealing from an outsider point of view. So here in our descendant selector for our H1 tag, we give it a nice font and set its color to go along with our theme. Now comes the important part. If we want to make this text really stand out, having a white border around it would be a great way of doing so. So let's create a border of our own. So here we've assigned the border property a padding of 9 pixels in all directions and assigned it a solid shade of white to its background. Now, in order to refine the centering and layout of our header, we set our display to inline block and set a border radius of 23 pixels, making our border circular instead of rectangular. Awesome, but inside of our header tag, we have some classes. If you remember, we had a head style class to style the H1 tag and an emphasis class for styling the span tag in the header. So let's head over to those classes and style them individually. For our head style class, we simply changed our font from monospace to Trebuchet MS and we removed the font style declaration altogether. Now, to make the word cars pop out in our car gallery page, let's head over to our emphasis class selector. So here in our emphasis class selector, we simply change the color from dark blue to dark orange, change the font style from normal to oblique, removed the font size declaration, changed our font from monospace to Trebuchet MS, and finally we kept the weight as is. Now, while our headers still need some work, at least our H1 tag is looking great on both pages. But here, there's another important takeaway to be noted. By using selector specificity, we changed our class selectors to override the declarations of our general H1 tag. In other words, by modifying our class selectors, we were able to override the declarations in our general selector. Now let's move on to our navigation bar, which contains both of our hyperlinks. Right now it looks raw, uncolored, and dull. Let's change that. First, in our descendant selector for our navigation tag, we assigned a background color to a nice gray, denoted by a pound sign and a series of Ds. Next, we removed all the padding to fit in with our H1 tag above. Finally, we assigned a border radius of 36 pixels to curve the vertices of our border and make it circular. Finally, for our last two declarations, we assigned a width of 95% and set our margin top property to 12 pixels in order to distance it from our H1 tag. The final thing we need to do is style our actual hyperlinks within our navigation bar. So here in our descendant selector, we are all ready to get to styling. So here, our first three declarations, we changed the font family to make it look more professional, we match its background color with the navigation bar, and finally we remove the underline from each hyperlink. Finally, we align all our text to the center and set our font size to a nice 17 pixels. Now, looking at our headers on both pages, and they look absolutely stunning. So for our home, we see it's well formatted, and if we go to our car gallery, we see that the word cars has a great amount of emphasis and looks absolutely amazing. Great, now both pages look well formatted, visually appealing, and eye-catching. This is the power of CSS inheritance and selector specificity. If you use these principles in tandem, your website will come to shape in a matter of minutes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and hopefully learned something new. Join me in the next one to learn about adding hover selectors and creating a new level of interactive elements to really heighten the overall user experience. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next one.